lights went out across a nation in a single orchestrated window. What began as flashes on monitors and emergency calls from hospitals unfolded overnight into a strategic shock, a simultaneous collapse of the national power grid that left millions without electricity, transportation, communications, and the basic functions of modern life. Analysts are describing an attack that struck generation plants, high-voltage transmission lines, and the critical transformer nodes that connect generation to consumers. The scale and precision reported hundreds of ballistic missiles assigned against electrical infrastructure represent not simply a military strike, but a deliberate campaign to impose what one analyst called a strategic condition: 8 million people in darkness. Those words, short, blunt, uncompromising, capture the immediate human reality and the larger operational consequence. Darkness in a modern state is not just the absence of light. It is the suspension of the systems that sustain hospitals, that fuel military command and control, that keep water moving and money flowing. It is a condition that degrades military power in ways that kinetic losses to tanks or aircraft do not. The difference between a power outage you can ride out and a deliberate national blackout is the difference between inconvenience and incapacitation. The target set was not random. Major generation facilities and the substations that link them to the grid were reportedly struck in a pattern designed to prevent effective emergency switching and to overwhelm redundancy. Israel's centralized generation assets, large fixed plants concentrated in a handful of locations, are efficient under normal conditions, but vulnerable when every critical node is attacked simultaneously. Hadera's Orot Rabin, the Eshkol complex near Ashdod, the reading station in the Tel Aviv area, Ruderberg in the south, and other key generation sites anchor a system whose high-voltage transmission network depends on a relatively small number of transformer stations. Those transformers are not simple commodities. A 400 kilovolt transformer is a custom-manufactured, heavy industrial piece of equipment that can cost millions and take more than a year to replace. Destroy enough of them in a short interval, and surviving generation cannot reach consumers, even if the plants themselves remain partially intact. The reported weapon of choice, an Iranian missile system described in open reporting over the last decade, was employed not against hardened fortresses, but against industrial nodes, substations, switchyards, the large transformers that sit exposed but are mission critical. The logic is stark and classical. Modern military effectiveness depends on modern infrastructure, and infrastructure is often far less survivable than military hardware. What this operation reportedly sought to do was to deliver damage that could not be patched quickly, to turn repair timelines into strategic time. Air defenses perform and within the envelope they were designed for. The question is, what happens when the incoming volume exceeds that envelope? Iron Dome batteries, David's Sling, and Arrow interceptors are formidable systems, but they are not infinite magazines. Because they are not infinite magazines, integrated air and missile defenses rely on layered capacity, radar networks, command and control links, and the efficient allocation of interceptors to highest value threats. Saturation attacks, large salvos distributed across dozens of targets, create a math problem. When the number of incoming trajectories outstrips available interceptors covering that specific target set, residual warheads reach their aims. In that scenario, the physical fires at generation sites and the blacked out substations are not incidental. They are the predictable outcome of a targeting plan that exploited finite magazine depth and the geographic concentration of critical nodes. The reported operational sequencing deepened the effect, launching during evening peak DMAS. Second, when consumption and grid stress are highest, dramatically reduces the system's ability to absorb sudden losses. Automatic protections and emergency procedures that work against isolated outages are ill-suited to the simultaneous destruction of every major node. The timing matters. An evening salvo turns a set of discrete damages into an instantaneous national collapse. The human consequences are immediate and painful. Hospitals are on emergency power, running on generators and finite fuel reserves. Water pumping stations, sewage treatment plants, emergency communications, and even the logistics that sustain first responders are operating on thresholds measured in hours. The military retains hardened islands of capability, command centers with backup generation air bases with emergency power for critical systems. But the broader logistics and industrial ecosystem that an Air Force or an Army requires is dependent on the civil grid. Aircraft can still fly from bases with fuel, and Army G systems kept alive by backup power, but maintenance, spare parts, fuel distribution, and the networks that coordinate operations are compromised when the national infrastructure around them darkens. Israel's Iron Dome does not function without electricity. Israel's command and control networks do not function without electricity. The sentence is literal and telling. Systems that are often portrayed as independent are in practice embedded within a civil technological ecosystem. When that ecosystem is stripped away, operational efficiency declines in ways that cannot be fully offset by tactical workarounds. Washington's response, by all accounts, has been immediate and tangible. Emergency generators, mobile power units, technical teams, and intelligence support are being mobilized to mitigate the most acute effects. Satellites and reconnaissance assets can provide damage assessment. Military logistics can deliver temporary capacity to critical hospitals and command nodes, but the degree is a blunt operational truth that emergency aid does not change. A national grid rebuilt from transformer-level destruction requires time. It cannot restore Israel's power grid. Not in hours, not in days, possibly not in weeks, is the hard calculus officials must confront. Even with rapid global support, manufacturing lead times, transportation, installation, and complex system commissioning push full civilian restoration into a timescale measured in months for comprehensive recovery. That timing is not an incidental technical footnote. It is geopolitical leverage. An attacker who can impose days, weeks, or months of degraded national function has created a window in which other operations gain effect, alliances are tested, and strategic narratives shift. This is not simply material damage. It is a force multiplier that compounds other pressures on a state in crisis. Equally consequential is how this event reframes assumptions. For decades, regional calculations have been built around the premise that one state's military superiority, its ability to project power, to deter, and to protect regional partners was effectively unchallengeable. An operation that demonstrably undermines that premise forces every capital in the region to reassess how it balances relationships and manages risk. Governments in Riyadh, Amman, Cairo, and Ankara will ask whether the security architectures they relied upon remain stable. Allies and partners will review contingency plans. Investors will reassess exposure. Energy markets, already jittery in times of regional stress, will react to the prospect of a prolonged infrastructure shock with price volatility, insurance repricing, and capital flight from uncertain investments. Major powers also read the event through doctrinal lenses. Moscow, which has invested in infrastructure targeting concepts, sees operational validation in the effectiveness of precision strikes against distributed economic energy networks. Beijing, Whichcomb, in its economic leverage with patient diplomacy, sees both risk and opportunity, a chance to position itself as an indispensable broker and supplier in the aftermath, building ties that outlast the immediate crisis. The global balance of influence is seldom reshaped in a single night, but the narratives that guide great power engagement can be shifted quickly when a doctrinal assumption is publicly and decisively challenged. There is a deeper institutional lesson as well, one about intelligence, analysis, and the dangers of mischaracterizing an adversary. Early assessments of emerging missile systems too often reduce capability to a narrow metric range or CEP against hardened military targets without considering the full range of plausible target sets. A weapon that lacks the precision to defeat a hardened bunker may nonetheless be fully suited to reliably engage open industrial infrastructure visible to satellite and mapped through persistent collection. A system optimized to place doves into the perimeter of open facilities does not need sub-meter accuracy to be operationally decisive against transformers, switchyards, and substations. The operational patience and institutional focus required to build such a capability, years of engineering, testing, intelligence collection, and targeting preparation deserve sober analysis. This is not about celebrating an adversary. It is about acknowledging that strategic investment under constraint can produce asymmetries that upset established deterrent narratives. When an adversary devotes effort to a specific operational logic, attacking an enemy's energy and lifelines rather than its armored brigades, the technical and analytic communities must adapt their assessments accordingly. The questions for policymakers and military planners are stark. How do neighbors and allies reconstitute deterrence when the assumed shield is pierced? How should defense investments rebalance between platform survivability and infrastructure harden? Between interceptor magazines and distributed redundancy, and perhaps most politically uncomfortable, what diplomatic and strategic pathways exist to reduce the incentives that produce this escalation in the first place. There will also be a very public, visible aftermath. Emergency power will be deployed to hospitals and command centers. Repair crews will work around the clock. Partial service will return to critical sectors. The physical darkness, literal blackouts in neighborhoods and factories will lift in weeks and months, yet the strategic darkness is more durable. When the assumptions that structured regional calculations are exposed as brittle, politics and alignments change not overnight, but over seasons and years. Trust phrase, risk premiums rise, new partnerships form. The rebuilding of infrastructure will be a test not only of technical resilience, but of political will. Who helps, who profits, and who wins influence in the reconstruction for the population at this end. Terror of the storm. The immediate priorities are elemental, safe water, functioning hospitals, secure communications, and enough power to keep emergency services running. For militaries, the priorities shift toward maintaining core deterrent and defensive functions, even as non-military resilience becomes a strategic asset. For diplomats, the urgent task is to prevent further escalation while devising longer-term frameworks that reduce the probability that critical national infrastructure becomes a preferred target set. If this operation was intended as a strategic argument, it was made with unmistakable clarity. The assertion is that military capability is not solely about platforms and bases. It is about the systems that sustain a society and the vulnerabilities those systems present. The response now required is similarly broad: tactical mitigation, technical repair, doctrinal revision, and political strategy. None of those steps is quick, and none of those steps is quick, and none can be accomplished in the hours after an attack. Yet even amid the uncertainty, a practical, necessary truth remains. The country will rebuild, essential services will be restored, and life will go on. The darkness will eventually lift. The infrastructure will eventually be rebuilt, but the political and strategic recalculation, the reckoning with vulnerabilities, doctrines, and assumptions will take longer and will shape the region's future in ways that are not simply reversible by power generation trucks and emergency transformers. What comes next will depend on the honesty of the conversations in emergency rooms, in general staff headquarters, in ministries of foreign affairs, and in capital corridors. Will policymakers adopt the hard lessons of this event and invest in distributed resilience, in rapid manufacturing and logistics, in new deterrent concepts that account for infrastructure targeting? Will regional actors seize the moment to reconfigure security arrangements to reduce the incentive to attack civilian felines, or will institutions default to familiar narratives and try to manage the shock within the frameworks that failed to anticipate it? For now, the immediate mission is humanitarian and technical: keep people alive, restore critical systems, and stabilize the situation. For the longer term, the mission is strategic: to build architectures, military, industrial, political, and diplomatic, that recognize the reality revealed by this night of darkness. The answers will not be tidy and they will not be quick, but the conversation is unavoidable. As the emergency crews work through the night and commanders adapt to operating in degraded conditions, one fact remains plain: when infrastructure becomes the decisive battlefield, resilience and foresight become the most consequential instruments of national power. The lights will return. The measures taken now will determine how long it takes, who pays the cost, and whether the vulnerabilities exposed today shape the region's future for ye. Ours to come.